The film opens with a man named Clay, who once belonged to an elite, secretive special forces unit known as the Beekeepers. This covert group handled missions too sensitive for standard law enforcement. Now, having left that life behind, Clay seeks peace as a beekeeper, renting a garage from Mrs. Parker, an elderly retired teacher. She spends her days working for a charity that supports women and children in need. Mrs. Parker appreciates Clay's quiet presence, and in turn, Clay is thankful for her kindness in allowing him to live on her property. One day, while Mrs. Parker works on her laptop, a sudden virus warning pops up on her screen. Panicked and unfamiliar with technology, she follows the instructions on the screen, which lead her to a supposed antivirus service. But in reality, it's a group of scammers, led by a man named Garnett, who prey on the vulnerable. Mrs. Parker, unaware, calls the number and gets connected to Garnett's team. He convinces her that her computer is infected and asks for her bank details to compensate her for the trouble. Trusting him, she provides the information and is shocked to receive $50,000 in her account. But when she tries to return the overpayment as instructed, everything vanishes, her personal savings and the charity's funds are stolen. Meanwhile, Clay, oblivious to this, is busy collecting honey, intending to give Mrs. Parker a jar as a gift. When he arrives at her home, something feels wrong. Grabbing a knife for safety, he enters the house, only to find Mrs. Parker dead, a gun by her side. Shocked and devastated, Clay is then confronted by an FBI agent, Verona, who points her weapon at him, believing he may be involved in Mrs. Parker's death. To make matters worse, Mrs. Parker was Verona's mother. The police are called, and Clay is taken in for questioning. During the investigation, Verona begins to uncover the truth. Her mother had been the victim of an elaborate scam, losing everything to a criminal gang that specializes in phishing schemes. Mrs. Parker's death, it turns out, was not a murder but a suicide brought on by despair. With this revelation, Clay is released, and Verona, grieving but determined, continues to pursue justice. After his release, Clay decides to take matters into his own hands. He contacts his former beekeeper comrades and gathers intel on the gang responsible for Mrs. Parker's death. The beekeepers quickly identify the culprits as UDG, a front for Garnett's criminal operations. Armed with this information, Clay sets out to exact revenge. He heads to UDG's headquarters, carrying 2 jerry cans of gasoline, and swiftly disables the security guards. Confronting the employees in the control room, Clay demands they cease their scamming activities. He drenches the room in gasoline and sets up a bomb that will detonate upon a phone call. When Garnett and his men arrive to stop him, Clay easily overpowers them, triggering the bomb and escaping as the building explodes. Garnett survives the explosion and contacts his boss, Danforth, explaining that their headquarters was destroyed by a man who calls himself the Beekeeper. Furious, Danforth orders Garnett to eliminate Clay, enlisting a team of thugs to finish the job. Meanwhile, Verona, who learns of the explosion, feels an unexpected satisfaction, though she's still unsure of Clay's involvement. The next day, Garnett's hired men track Clay to his beekeeping farm. As Clay leaves, they destroy his beehives and follow him. But Clay, always a step ahead, anticipates the attack. When they make their move, Clay fights back, dispatching the thugs with deadly precision. Garnett, however, manages to escape. At the same time, Verona uncovers more about UDG's operations, leading her to suspect a deeper conspiracy involving Garnett's boss, Danforth. As she pieces together the connections, she begins to realize that Clay's fight is about more than just personal revenge, it's a battle against a powerful criminal empire. After narrowly escaping Garnett's thugs, Clay tracks Garnett down. In a brutal confrontation, Clay ties Garnett to the front of a car and drives it into a body of water, drowning him. With his final breath, Garnett reveals more about Danforth's operation, setting Clay on a direct collision course with the man behind the entire scam. As Clay continues his mission, Danforth grows increasingly paranoid. He reaches out to Wallace, a former CIA operative who now handles his security. Wallace, sensing the gravity of the situation, contacts the current CIA director, Janet, to get more information on Clay. When he learns that Clay is a former beekeeper, Wallace decides that Clay must be eliminated. The CIA hires Anna, a beekeeper operative, to take Clay out. She ambushes him at a gas station, but Clay manages to outmaneuver her, severing her fingers and setting the gas station ablaze. The explosion leaves no trace of Anna, and the beekeepers, wary of further involvement, agree to remain neutral in the fight between Clay and Danforth. With his enemies closing in, Clay uses Anna's severed finger to access her home and gather intelligence. He tracks Danforth to a heavily guarded skyscraper known as the 9 Points Building. Armed with explosives and weapons, Clay prepares for a final showdown. At the same time, Wallace's Special Forces team, now aware of Clay's identity, lies in wait at the building. However, when Clay arrives, he surprises everyone by attacking the SWAT team outside before making his way into the building. Inside, he blends in with the employees until he's recognized by one of the Special Forces operatives. A fierce battle ensues, with Clay systematically taking down his attackers. As Clay fights his way through the building, he interrogates one of the executives, who reveals that Danforth is protected by an untouchable network of power. But Clay, undeterred, vows to bring the entire operation down. Verona, now hot on Clay's trail, arrives at the scene just as Clay prepares for his final confrontation with Danforth. She realizes that Clay's mission aligns with her own pursuit of justice, and as Danforth takes his mother, the President of the United States, hostage, the tension reaches a boiling point. In a final act of justice, Clay eliminates Danforth, bringing an end to the criminal empire that destroyed so many lives. Verona, torn between her duty and her sense of right and wrong, allows Clay to escape. The film ends with Clay slipping away into the night, leaving behind a world forever changed by his actions.